The kitchen was a war zone. Plates piled high in the sink, dirty glasses lined the counter, and the faint smell of burned toast lingered in the air. I was standing at the stove, flipping a pancake that refused to cooperate when I heard my son Malik talking from the living room. "Mom, you eat for free here," he called, laughing as he pushed open the door, his hands full of his latest tech toy, some old Xbox controller he claimed he could fix. I looked over my shoulder, raising an eyebrow. "What you mean, Malik?" I said, trying to keep my tone light. I didn't like where this conversation might be going. He grinned, throwing himself onto the couch like he owned the place. "You heard me," he said, holding up the controller like it was a prize. "You always cooking for us, but you never ask for nothing in return. We eating for free." I didn't laugh. Instead, I set the pancake down on the plate, my hands frozen mid-move. I was used to Malik's wild humor, but today his words felt different. The smile faded from my face as I turned around to face him. My son was 16, but I swear sometimes he thought he was 25. He thought he knew it all. "Free?" I asked. "Is that so? You think this is all just handed to you?" Malik stretched his legs out, not even glancing up at me as he scrolled through his phone. "I mean, yeah, you do all this cooking, washing, cleaning, but you never ask for nothing. No thanks, no nothing, just doing it." I folded my arms across my chest, holding back the words that threatened to spill out. I had been doing it all by choice, sure, but sometimes that didn't mean I didn't want a little recognition. I had been the one who stayed up late with him during school projects, the one who dragged him out of bed every morning to make sure he was ready for school, and the one who still worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything. Instead, I swallowed the frustration down and forced a smile. "You right," I said, softening my voice, "but let me tell you something, Malik. You might think you're eating for free, but there's a price for everything in this world. Trust me on that." Malik raised an eyebrow, clearly not picking up on the seriousness in my tone. "What you mean, Mom?" He sounded like he was humoring me, and that was when I realized something. He didn't know. He didn't know the sacrifices I made, the nights I stayed awake, stressed, wondering if I could make it to the end of the month. He didn't know the struggles that were hidden beneath the surface. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I'd sheltered him too much from the realities of the world, but in that moment I realized something deep within me. It was time for him to understand. Without saying another word, I grabbed my phone from the counter and dialed a number I had been avoiding. I didn't have to say much. I didn't need to. This was something I had been waiting to do, just waiting for the right moment to call in a favor that was long overdue. I hit the dial button. The line rang once, twice, and then the voice on the other end answered. "Hello?" came a low voice, smooth with a slight drawl that I couldn't quite place. I smirked, the tension finally easing from my shoulders. "Yeah, it's me," I said, my tone colder now. "I need you to come by." It's time Malik learned something important. The phone clicked and I sat back, the weight of the moment sinking in. This wasn't just a phone call, it was a message, to my son, to myself, and to the world. A reminder that everything has a cost, and now it was time to collect. As I hung up the phone, I turned back to Malik, who was now looking at me with a confused expression, but before he could say anything, I walked toward the door. "I'll be back in a bit," I said. "Don't touch my pancakes." And with that, I stepped out the door, but what exactly was I about to do? What was the lesson I needed Malik to learn? The answer was coming, and Malik's world was about to get turned upside down. The clock was ticking, and this call wasn't just about teaching him something new. It was about finally taking back control. The air outside was cool, the kind of crisp that only came with the fall, when the leaves turned and the world seemed to slow down. I walked down the front steps, my heels clicking against the cracked pavement. The streets of our neighborhood were familiar, but today they felt different, almost distant. I wasn't sure how long I'd been waiting for a moment like this. Maybe I hadn't even realized it until now. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, walking fast, not giving myself time to second-guess my decision. The phone call I made, that was just the first step. A warning, a promise. A reminder that life doesn't always give you what you want just because you think you deserve it. I knew exactly where I was headed. The little corner bar down the street was dimly lit, the kind of place where the music was low and the drinks were strong. It wasn't much, but it had been enough for me when I needed a place to hide, a place to figure out what was next. It was also where I knew I could find Frankie. Frankie had been a part of my life for years, ever since before Malik was born. He was the kind of guy who always knew everyone and had a finger in every pie. He was smooth, a little dangerous, and had a lot of connections, ones that I had learned to use when I needed to. Today, I needed him for something more than just a friendly chat. I pushed open the door to the bar, the familiar scent of cheap whiskey and stale beer hitting me. The place was empty except for a few regulars scattered around, nursing their drinks in silence. At the far end, near the jukebox, Frankie sat in his usual spot, nursing a glass of bourbon and scribbling something on a napkin. When he saw me, his face broke into a grin. He had that look like he knew something I didn't, but I wasn't worried. "Long time no see, sis," Frankie called, his voice raspy from too many years of smoking and drinking. "What's good with you?" I gave him a nod, walking over to him. "I need a favor," I said flatly, no pleasantries, no small talk. He raised an eyebrow. "A favor, huh? You know I don't do those for free." I sat down beside him, throwing him a look that let him know this wasn't something I was joking about. He could play his games later, but not right now. "I'm serious, Frankie," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I need to teach my son a lesson. I need you to make sure Malik knows what the world really is, what it's like when you've been running on empty for years. I'm done with sugarcoating everything." Frankie's grin faltered for a second. "You really want to do that, though? You sure you're ready for all that comes with it?" I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise in my chest. This wasn't about me anymore. I had spent my whole life looking out for Malik, making sure he didn't have to see the ugly side of things. But now I was done. It was time for him to see the truth. The real world wasn't kind to people who just sat back and expected handouts. "I don't care what it takes, Frankie. He's got to get it. He's got to see how the other side lives, how hard it is to survive when you're stuck in a system that doesn't care about you." My voice dropped to a whisper. "You know what I mean?" He eyed me carefully, studying my face. It wasn't that he didn't understand, it was just that he didn't want to get caught up in something that could come back to bite him. Frankie finally sighed, tapping his fingers against the rim of his glass. "You know I can make it happen, but you gotta understand something, man. Once this starts, there's no going back. You might get the lesson across, but at what cost? You sure you're ready for him to see the world as it is?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." He studied me for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right, I'll handle it. I'll make sure Malik learns the hard way. But don't come crying to me if things go sideways. You're the one calling the shots here." I took a deep breath and nodded. "I got it, just make sure it hits home." Frankie stood up, dropping a few bills on the table and slipping his jacket on. "Consider it done, but I'll need you to stay out of the way. No interference, you hear me?" I nodded again, my heart racing as the weight of my decision settled over me. I had made my choice. There was no turning back now. As he walked out the door, I sat there for a second, letting the quiet of the bar swallow me whole. This wasn't just about Malik learning a lesson, it was about breaking the cycle. I had been stuck in it for too long, trying to be everything to everyone, but now I was ready to stop playing the role of the martyr. My son was going to understand that nothing in this world came easy. And if I had to show him the hard way, then that's what I'd do. But would Malik really understand? Would this wake him up, or would it send him spiraling into a deeper rebellion? I had just set a chain of events into motion, and now all I could do was wait and watch. This was only the beginning. I sat in the dim corner of the bar, nursing a warm beer that I had no intention of finishing. My mind was too busy for drinking, too many thoughts swirling like a tornado that wouldn't stop. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this uneasy. Maybe it was the weight of what I'd just done, or maybe it was the fear that I wasn't ready for the fallout. Either way, I couldn't sit still. I tapped my fingers against the tabletop, the rhythmic sound barely cutting through the muffled chatter and clinking glasses. My mind kept going back to Malik. He was only 16, too young to really understand what was coming for him, but at the same time, too old for me to keep shielding him. The world wasn't going to hold back, and it wasn't going to show him mercy just because he had a good heart. I hated myself for even thinking about it this way, but I knew it had to happen. If I didn't take control now, if I didn't show him the raw, unfiltered truth, he'd spend the rest of his life thinking the world owed him something. The door to the bar opened with a creak, and the cold breeze hit me in the face. I turned around to see Frankie walking back in, looking as calm as ever. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes hard but his face relaxed, like he'd just finished a job that wasn't nearly as complicated as it should have been. "You sure about this, sis?" he asked, his voice low, just loud enough for me to hear over the noise. I took a deep breath, looking out the window for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. I'm sure this is the only way. He's got to know how hard life really is. He's too comfortable. Thinks everything's just gonna fall into his lap. Frankie nodded, understanding all too well. He wasn't a stranger to struggle, but he had made his way through it in his own way, bending the rules when necessary, always looking for that edge. That was the kind of world Malik had no clue about, but it was the world he needed to see. "You know," Frankie started, lowering his voice, "this isn't gonna be a quick fix. You don't just snap your fingers and have someone wake up. It's gonna hurt him, and it's gonna hurt you too. You ready for that?" I nodded slowly, feeling a weight settle into my chest. "I don't have a choice anymore. I've tried all the easy ways. Now it's time for him to understand that life ain't no free ride. No one's gonna hand you anything, no matter how much you think you deserve it." Frankie watched me for a moment, his eyes calculating, as if he was trying to figure out if I was serious or if this was just some sort of angry rant. He leaned back in the booth, his fingers tapping on the surface as he thought. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter. "All right, it's done. Malik's gonna learn. I made sure of that." I took a sharp breath. "What did you do?" Frankie smiled, a smirk that made my stomach churn. "Let's just say I've got some friends who know how to bring someone down a notch. They'll make sure Malik gets the message without leaving any permanent scars, of course." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean, bring him down a notch?" Frankie leaned forward, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite read. "You wanted him to learn a lesson, right? Well, I'm giving him one. Malik's gonna see what it's like to be a little vulnerable, to be in a position where he has to work for what he wants, where he can't rely on anyone but himself." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Frankie, this isn't a damn game. I'm not asking for some twisted lesson in humiliation. I want him to understand the value of hard work, not for him to be treated like some punching bag." His grin faded and he leaned back in his seat again, throwing his hands up. "I hear you, sis. Trust me, nobody's gonna get hurt. I've got the best people in town, but Malik needs to experience the struggle firsthand. Sometimes the best lessons are the hardest ones. Ain't nobody giving handouts in this world, not even to your son, especially not to your son." I stared at him for a long moment, my mind racing. This wasn't how I pictured it. I wanted Malik to learn, sure, but I didn't want him broken. I didn't want him to think the world was only about pain and suffering. Wasn't there another way? But I knew the truth. Malik wouldn't understand any of this unless it hit him hard. Unless he saw for himself what it felt like to be vulnerable, to be on the edge and not know if he could climb out. I took another deep breath. "All right, do it. But I swear to God, if anything goes too far, I'll make sure you regret it." Frankie nodded solemnly. "I got you, sis. This is gonna be tough on him, but you'll see, when it's over, Malik will know what the real world is about. No more illusions." He stood up, putting on his jacket. "I'll take care of it. You just focus on being there when it all comes crashing down. He's gonna need you then." I didn't want to admit it, but he was right. Malik was going to need me, not just for support, but for understanding. This was the kind of lesson you couldn't just shake off. It would stay with him, maybe for the rest of his life. As Frankie walked out of the bar, the door slamming behind him, I sat there for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had just set the wheels in motion. And once they started turning, there would be no stopping them. But what did Malik's future look like now? Was this the turning point he needed, or was I about to lose him in a way I couldn't undo? The clock was ticking and the lesson was coming, whether he was ready for it or not. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual. My body felt heavy, like it had been holding its breath all night, waiting for something. I had barely slept, the weight of my decisions gnawing at my mind like a pit bull on a bone. I dragged myself out of bed, the morning sun barely creeping through the blinds, casting a pale light across the room. Malik was still asleep in his room, probably dreaming of whatever it was he thought life had in store for him. I'd been waiting for this moment for so long that it almost didn't feel real. There was no turning back now. Frankie had made his move, and what was coming next was going to shake Malik to his core. Whether he liked it or not, this lesson was happening. I wasn't even sure what kind of damage would be done in the process, but in some way I knew it was necessary. As I moved through the house, I found myself drawn to the kitchen. I wasn't even hungry, but the routine of making coffee calmed me. It was funny how something as simple as brewing a pot of coffee could make everything feel a little less chaotic. I poured the hot liquid into a mug and sat down at the table, the steam rising, curling into the air. The sound of the front door opening and closing caught my attention, and I glanced up. Malik was standing in the doorway, his hoodie pulled low over his head like he was trying to hide from the world. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, slouching over to the counter and grabbing a granola bar. "Morning," I said softly, trying not to show how tightly my stomach was wound. "Sleep okay?" He shrugged without looking at me. "Yeah, same old." I bit my lip. Same old, that was the problem, wasn't it? He had no idea how much his life had been built on a foundation of same old, and it was about to crumble. I stared at him for a moment, wondering if today would be the day he finally understood. Wondering if today was the day he would stop thinking everything came easy. I wanted to tell him so much, to ask him if he was ready for what was coming, but I knew better. He wasn't ready, and that was exactly why I had to do this. "Listen, Malik," I began, my voice quiet but firm. "I need you to stay home today. Don't go out, don't hang with your friends, just stay here." His eyes flicked up to meet mine, a flash of confusion crossing his face. "Why? What's up?" I sighed, sitting back in the chair, trying to keep the tension from my shoulders. I couldn't lie to him, not anymore, but I also couldn't tell him the full truth, not yet. "There's something I need you to understand. I've been working too hard, too long to protect you from the real world, but I can't do that anymore. You need to see what life is really like." Malik frowned, opening his granola bar and tearing the wrapper off. "You talking about one of those life lessons again?" His voice was laced with sarcasm, and I could see the impatience in his eyes. "You always say that, Mom, but I don't need your lectures, I'm fine." I felt my jaw tighten. Of course he thought that. He had no idea how much I had sacrificed, how much I had done just to keep him safe from the things I'd seen, the things I'd lived through. He had no clue, but soon he would. "You're not fine, Malik," I said softly, but with a force behind it. "And that's why you're gonna stay home today. I need you to understand what it means to have nothing, to be vulnerable. You think it's all a game, that everything just falls into your lap, but it doesn't. Trust me on that." He looked at me like I was crazy. "You're acting weird, you're scaring me, Mom." I wanted to say more, but I didn't know how to explain the weight on my heart, the pressure I was feeling. This wasn't just about Malik, this was about me too, about everything I'd been running from, the guilt that I had kept him in the dark for so long, hiding him from the truth. I didn't want him to end up like me, scrambling, barely keeping it together, always just one paycheck away from disaster. But I couldn't protect him forever. "I'm not trying to scare you," I said, trying to soften my tone. "I just need you to listen and to trust me, okay?" He shrugged, turning away from me. "Yeah, whatever, I don't know why you're acting all crazy about this. It's just one day, right?" I watched him walk out of the kitchen, and for a moment I felt my stomach drop. He still didn't get it. He didn't understand the gravity of the situation, didn't realize that today was the beginning of something much bigger than either of us could control. I stayed at the table, my coffee growing cold, the silence in the house too loud, too heavy. What would happen when Malik finally realized that the world wasn't going to bend for him? What would happen when he found out how hard it was to make it through, how hard it was to survive when you were constantly fighting for something better? But maybe that was the point. Maybe this was the only way he could see what I had been protecting him from all these years. As the hours passed, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen when Malik's world cracked open. How would he handle it when the bubble he'd lived in finally popped? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew this was only the beginning. The calm before the storm. The day dragged on with a strange stillness that felt almost suffocating. Malik spent most of his time locked in his room, his door shut tight as usual. I didn't know what he was doing in there, but I could hear the faint sound of his video games blaring through the walls. The boy was stubborn, and part of me respected that, even if it made my job harder. But today wasn't going to be like any other day. Today, he was going to see the cracks in the perfect little life he thought he had. I sat in the living room, flipping through the channels on the TV, but nothing could hold my attention. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing at the clock, waiting for the moment when Malik would finally step into the world I was trying to show him. When he would step out of his bubble and see how real life worked. I didn't know how it was going to unfold, but I knew that whatever happened, it had to happen now. I had done what I could to shelter him, but the world outside those four walls was brutal, and if I didn't teach him that soon, life would do it for me, and that might be worse. By midday, my nerves were shot. I kept pacing around the house, checking the front door every few minutes. Finally, around 1 p.m., I heard a knock at the door, sharp and purposeful. I looked out the peephole and saw Frankie standing there, dressed in his usual all-black ensemble like he was ready for business. I opened the door, trying to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was pounding in my chest. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low, but there was a certain energy in it that made me hesitate. I nodded slowly. "Let's just get this over with." He grinned, flashing his teeth for a moment. "You know, when you told me you wanted to give Malik a taste of the real world, I didn't think you meant it literally, but hey, your call." I stepped aside, letting Frankie into the house, and closed the door behind him. He didn't need to be here long, just enough to set things in motion. I found myself walking to Malik's room. The knock at his door felt like it came from someone else's hands, not mine. I wanted to pull back, to go back to the safe space where everything was just normal, but I couldn't. "Malik," I said, my voice sharp, "get out here now." The door opened just a crack and Malik peeked his head out. "What's up?" "I thought you were gonna let me chill today." "Nope," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "Get dressed, I'm taking you somewhere." He stared at me like I had two heads. "Where?" "What the hell, Mom? You'll see when we get there," I replied, not giving him the chance to argue. "Just get dressed, and don't ask questions." He groaned, but I could see the curiosity starting to creep into his eyes. Without saying another word, he pulled the door open and disappeared back inside his room. A few minutes later, he came out dressed in a hoodie and jeans, looking half annoyed, half confused. Frankie was waiting by the door, arms crossed, leaning against the wall like he was in no hurry. Malik shot him a questioning look, but Frankie just raised an eyebrow. "You ready to learn something today, kid?" Frankie asked, his tone a little playful but edged with seriousness. "Because what's about to happen might change the way you see things." Malik's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. He knew better than to argue now. I was already feeling the tension building between us, like some invisible thread pulling tighter with each step I took. This was it, the moment he would be forced to see the world for what it was, ugly, raw, and unfiltered. We all piled into my car, the engine starting with a loud roar as I pulled out of the driveway. The streets were quieter than usual, and the low hum of the radio filled the silence. Malik had his arms crossed, looking out the window like he was lost in his own thoughts. But I could tell he was still processing everything. Was he finally starting to understand, or was he just going along for the ride, waiting for me to explain everything? I could barely keep my mind focused on the road as I drove, the distance between the house and our destination feeling longer with every passing minute. Frankie's place was just outside of town, in a part of the city that most people didn't bother with. The kind of place people avoided, where things were a little too real, a little too close to the edge. I had made sure Malik never saw this side of town, but today I wasn't shielding him anymore. We reached the spot about 20 minutes later, pulling up to a beat-up building with faded graffiti on the walls. It was an old warehouse, one of Frankie's connections, and I could already feel the tension in the air. This wasn't a place for the faint of heart. I looked at Malik, who was staring at the building, his face a mix of confusion and skepticism. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is where the real world lives, Malik," I said softly, my voice edged with both fear and resolve. "This is where people who don't have anything left find a way to survive." Frankie slapped his hand on the hood of the car, signaling that it was time. "Come on, kid, let's see if you can learn a thing or two." As we all got out of the car and walked toward the building, Malik's footsteps slowed, and I could see the unease creeping into his body language. This wasn't some friendly field trip, this wasn't a game, this was a lesson he wasn't prepared for, and as the door to the warehouse opened, I knew there was no going back. Malik had no idea what he was walking into. His world was about to change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine, and the lesson I had been hoping he'd learn on his own was now in someone else's hands. But would it be too much for him? Would this new world break him, or would he rise to meet it? The next few hours would decide. The moment we stepped inside the warehouse, the temperature seemed to drop. The place smelled of rust, sweat, and something else I couldn't place, something sharp like metal and oil. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the wide, open space, bouncing off the concrete walls. The whole atmosphere was tense, raw. It wasn't the kind of place a kid like Malik was used to. It was too gritty, too real. Frankie led the way, walking with that cocky swagger that made him seem untouchable. I could see Malik trailing behind me, his steps hesitant, his eyes darting around like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The warehouse was a far cry from anything he'd ever experienced. No more comfortable couches or quiet evenings with Netflix. No, this was survival. This was the world I had tried to protect him from. "Relax," Frankie said, turning to Malik with a sly grin. "It's not like we're here to make you a part of this place, but you are going to learn a few things." Malik looked up at me, confusion written all over his face. "Mom, what is this place? Why did you bring me here?" I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. My heart was racing, my hands slightly trembling. I hated seeing Malik so uneasy, so uncertain. But I had to remind myself this was the point. This was what needed to happen. He needed to feel uncomfortable. He needed to see what it was like for people who didn't have everything handed to them, who didn't live in a bubble of comfort and protection. Frankie opened a door that led to the back of the warehouse, and we stepped inside a much smaller room. There were a few men sitting at a table, their expressions hard, their eyes cold. The air in here was even thicker, like a storm was about to hit. They were the kind of men who didn't ask questions, didn't care about anything except the deal, the hustle, the grind. "This is where the real action happens," Frankie said, gesturing to the men at the table. "These guys, they don't care about your soft life, Malik. They care about money, survival, and the hustle. They've got no room for anything else." Malik shifted uncomfortably on his feet, clearly wanting to leave. I could see the fight in him, the urge to reject this reality, to cling to his own safe world, but I wasn't going to let him. "Not now. Sit down, Malik," I said softly, my voice almost drowned out by the low hum of conversation from the men. "Listen, just listen." He shot me a look, but eventually he sat down at the edge of the table, his posture stiff, like he didn't want to let anyone see how uncomfortable he was. I could feel his unease radiating off him like an invisible wall, but there was no going back now. Frankie pulled out a chair and sat down across from Malik while I stood near the door, watching, waiting. The room went quiet for a moment, the tension hanging thick in the air. The men at the table didn't say anything, but I could see the way they looked at Malik, the way they sized him up, like they were deciding whether or not he belonged here. "You want to know what the world really is?" Frankie asked, leaning back in his chair. "It's not about playing video games all day or hanging with your friends. It's about dealing with shit when it comes your way. It's about surviving when you don't have anyone to help you, when you don't have a plan. It's about making sure you don't get played. You think that's easy?" Malik's eyes flicked between Frankie and the men at the table, his mouth tightening. He didn't respond right away. I could see him grappling with the reality of what was happening, the truth hitting him in waves. His world, his perfect little bubble, was cracking, and there was nothing I could do but watch. "You think this is some game?" One of the men at the table spoke up, his voice gravelly and rough. He had a scar that ran down his cheek, and his eyes were cold, almost lifeless. "You think it's all about playing with toys and getting free rides? You think you're entitled to anything? Let me tell you something, kid. Ain't nobody giving you shit. You have to earn it. You have to fight for it. And if you can't, you won't survive." The words hit Malik like a slap to the face. I could see the color drain from his cheeks, his lips parting as he tried to process everything that was being thrown at him. I could see the cracks in his confidence, the fear slowly creeping in as he realized that this world was nothing like the one he had imagined. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. He was at a loss for how to respond, how to defend the life he had always known. His bravado was slipping away, leaving him exposed. "This is real, Malik," Frankie said, his voice quieter now. "This is what it takes to make it. You want to live in the fantasy world where everything is handed to you? Fine, but out here, you have to know the game, you have to play it, and if you can't, you'll be chewed up and spit out." I watched as Malik's hands clenched into fists, his body tensing as he tried to process what was happening. The moment was too much, too overwhelming for him to understand in full. His world had just collided with reality, and it wasn't a smooth landing. I could see the gears turning in his head, but I didn't know if he was ready for it. "Not yet." Finally, Malik stood up, his face flushed with frustration. "I don't belong here. I don't belong with these people. I don't want this." His voice cracked, and for the first time I saw the fear in his eyes, the raw, unfiltered fear of someone who had never known real struggle. And that's when it hit me. I had done what I set out to do. I had opened his eyes, but I wasn't sure if he was ready to see everything. As Malik stormed out of the room, I realized that maybe this lesson was far from over. But had I pushed him too far, too fast? Was this the moment where he'd start to understand, or was I pushing him into a rebellion I couldn't control? I could only hope that somewhere in the chaos he'd find the lesson I'd meant to teach him. The sound of Malik's footsteps pounding down the hallway was unmistakable. I didn't even have to turn around to know he was heading straight for the door. I could feel the shift in the air, the tension building like a storm that was about to break. I stayed still, my body rigid, my heart racing as I listened to the muffled sound of him slamming the door behind him. I had known this was coming. It was inevitable. No one likes to have their world turned upside down, especially not when they've lived a life of comfort thinking everything is within their reach. But this was exactly why I'd done it. I had to show him the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I stayed in the small room for a few more seconds, the voices of the men still buzzing in my ears, the heaviness of the moment pressing down on me. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out. I couldn't chase him now. I couldn't go after him like some helpless mother trying to make everything better. I had to give him space. He needed to process this on his own. As I stepped into the cool, dimly lit hallway, I could see Frankie standing near the door, his arms crossed and a look of quiet approval in his eyes. He had seen the whole thing unfold, watched as Malik struggled with the harshness of the world he had never truly seen. Frankie wasn't wrong about anything, but I hated how he made it look so easy. He had always known how to pull the strings, manipulate situations. He had that knack for reading people, for knowing when and how to push them to their breaking point. But was it the right thing to do? "Don't worry about it, sis," Frankie said, his voice low but calm. "You did what you had to do, he'll come around." I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to respond. Was I supposed to feel proud of myself for showing Malik the truth? Because I didn't. I felt empty, like something important had just been broken. And maybe it had been, maybe that was part of the lesson. Sometimes you have to destroy what you've built to build something stronger. I walked past him, my mind in a whirlwind. I needed to find Malik. I needed to make sure he was okay, no matter how mad he was, no matter how much he hated me in this moment. This lesson wasn't over, and I knew it was only the beginning of something much bigger. I found him sitting in the car, his back against the seat, his arms folded tightly across his chest. His eyes were fixed on the dashboard, his jaw clenched. He hadn't even noticed me standing there for a few seconds. "Malik," I said, my voice softer this time. No more anger, no more commands, just me trying to reach him. He didn't turn to look at me. "I don't want to talk, Mom," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The frustration and hurt in his tone was enough to make my heart drop. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. My first instinct was to reach out, to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I knew better than that. I couldn't fix this right away. I had to let him feel the weight of what had happened. "I know you're mad at me," I said, sliding into the passenger seat next to him. "And I know you probably don't understand why I did it, but I need you to trust me. I'm not trying to destroy your life. I'm trying to help you see what's out there, what people are really up against." Malik shifted in his seat but didn't say anything. His silence felt like a wall between us, but I wasn't giving up, not now. "You're still my son," I continued, my voice shaky but steady. "And I love you, but I can't let you live in this bubble where everything is perfect. You need to know what happens when you're out there on your own and no one is there to catch you." He finally turned his head slightly, his eyes bloodshot and tired. "You don't get it, Mom. You're trying to teach me a lesson, but all I'm hearing is how messed up everything is. You think this is helping me. All I see is how I can never be good enough for you. How I'm never gonna measure up." His words hit me harder than anything I had felt in years. The anger, the frustration, the hurt in his voice. Was this really the lesson I was trying to teach him? Was this really what I wanted? To push him away, to make him feel like he wasn't enough? "No, Malik, that's not it at all," I said, my throat tightening. "I want you to be more than enough. I want you to be strong enough to face anything that comes your way. I want you to have the tools to survive in a world that's never going to be fair. But I can't give that to you if you stay sheltered, if you stay ignorant to the realities out there." Life isn't about always being right or always being perfect. It's about learning from your mistakes and growing from them. He let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Mom. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now. I'm just confused, and I don't know if I can handle all this. I put a hand on his shoulder, my heart breaking for him. He was scared. I could see it now beneath all the anger. Malik was scared, and maybe that's what I had overlooked. He wasn't ready for the full weight of the world. He wasn't ready to handle the harshness of reality just yet. But that didn't mean I was wrong. He would learn, eventually. I know, baby, I said softly, squeezing his shoulder. I know, but we'll figure this out together, okay? You don't have to have it all figured out right now, but I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. We just sat there in the car, in the quiet. He wasn't ready to forgive me, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand why I did it. The next few days would tell me if Malik could truly process everything that had happened. But would he pull away more, or would he come to me asking questions, wanting answers? One thing was for sure, this lesson was far from over. The days following that afternoon in the car were a blur of tension and silence. Malik stayed in his room more often, locked away in the sanctuary he had created for himself. I could hear the muffled sounds of his music blasting, the low hum of his video games, the occasional shout at his phone as he texted someone, anything to keep the world out. I understood why he was retreating. I could almost feel the storm brewing inside him, the confusion, the anger. It wasn't just about the warehouse or what he'd seen. It was about everything, the sudden shift in his reality, the loss of the comfortable bubble he had lived in, and the feeling that his whole life had been a lie. That's what hurt the most. For him, anyway, and for me. I had spent so many years shielding him, keeping him safe from the harsh realities I had known too well. But now I had to wonder, did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh? Did I break something that couldn't be fixed? I spent the days trying to keep myself busy, work, laundry, cleaning, whatever I could do to fill the empty space. The quiet was deafening, and the distance between Malik and me seemed to grow by the hour. I kept telling myself that this was part of the process, that he needed time to process what had happened. But in my gut, I felt something else, a growing unease, a fear that I had done something that might push him away forever. That night after dinner, if you could even call it that, considering how little we spoke to each other, I went to bed early. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The weight of the past few days felt like it was suffocating me. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I heard a soft knock at my bedroom door. I sat up, blinking in confusion, my heart skipping a beat. I didn't know what to expect. For a second, I thought it might be one of the neighbors, but then I realized it was Malik. His knock was tentative, almost like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. "Yeah," I called, my voice hoarse from the exhaustion. The door creaked open, and there he stood, Malik, his face drawn and tired, his hoodie still on like he'd been wearing it for days. He didn't speak at first, just stood there looking unsure of himself. But I could see something in his eyes, something that wasn't there before. "Can I come in?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant, and for the first time in days I could hear the vulnerability in it. I nodded, pushing the blankets aside and sitting up on the edge of the bed. "Of course, you know you don't need to ask." Malik stepped into the room slowly, like he was walking into unknown territory. He sat down on the chair in the corner, his eyes never meeting mine. For a moment, the silence between us stretched on, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid in the air. I waited for him to speak first. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to let him lead this conversation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed deeply. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything you said. About what I saw." I couldn't help the way my heart clenched at his words, so he was thinking about it, and that made everything feel a little less hopeless. He wasn't shutting me out entirely. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand. "I don't get it, though," he continued, his voice thick with frustration. "Why did you have to do it like that? Why couldn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just, I don't know, explain? You didn't have to drag me into that world." I took a slow breath, trying to collect myself. "I didn't want to drag you into it, Malik, I didn't, but you weren't seeing the bigger picture. I've been trying to teach you everything I know, trying to protect you from the things I've been through. But the thing is, sometimes you can't protect people from reality. It hits you when you least expect it." Malik looked at the floor, his fingers twisting in the fabric of his hoodie. I don't know, Mom. I thought I had it all figured out, but then I saw how messed up everything really is, and it freaked me out. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. I let out a long, shaky breath, my voice steadying as I spoke. You're not supposed to have it all figured out, Malik. None of us do, but I had to show you that life isn't as simple as you thought it was. You can't just go through it expecting everything to fall into place. Sometimes it gets messy. Sometimes it's not fair, but you have to learn to fight for yourself to survive, and that's what I wanted you to see. He was quiet for a moment, staring at the floor like he was processing everything. I get it now, he said softly. But I still don't know if I'm ready for all that. It's a lot. I nodded, my heart heavy with understanding. I know it's a lot, and you don't have to be ready right now, but you will be. It's gonna take time. I'm not asking you to change overnight, but when you're ready, I'll be here, and I'll help you through it. Malik didn't say anything for a long time. Instead, he just sat there, his hands resting in his lap, the weight of the conversation hanging between us. But when he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. I don't hate you for what you did, Mom. I was just angry. I didn't understand, but I think I do now. I need some time to think. I need to figure out what it all means for me. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. He didn't hate me. He wasn't shutting me out entirely. It wasn't going to be easy, and we still had a long way to go, but this was progress. Take all the time you need, I said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. I'm not going anywhere, and when you're ready, we'll talk some more. We'll figure it out together. Malik nodded slowly, his face softer now, like he had finally let his guard down. Thanks, Mom. As he stood up to leave, I felt a glimmer of hope flicker inside me. Maybe this wasn't all lost. Maybe, just maybe, Malik and I would find a way through this together. It wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning of a much bigger conversation, a deeper journey we'd have to take together. But at least now I wasn't doing it alone, and Malik wasn't either. The real test was just starting. Would he finally be able to take the lessons to heart, or would he slip back into his old ways? Only time would tell. Weeks passed, and the distance between Malik and me seemed to shrink little by little. It wasn't a quick fix, but it wasn't supposed to be. This wasn't a lesson you could teach overnight. We had started to talk more, not just about what had happened in the warehouse, but about everything, the uncomfortable stuff, the real stuff. One night, I found myself sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when Malik came into the living room. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at me with that same uncertain expression he had worn when he first walked into my bedroom that night. But this time, it was different. The hardness in his eyes had softened, replaced with something I hadn't seen before: vulnerability. The anger that had been bubbling inside him for so long had started to fade, and I saw the person he was becoming. He sat down beside me, his shoulders a little less tense than before, his movements less guarded. For a few moments, there was only silence between us, but it was the kind of silence that felt more comfortable now. Mom, he said, his voice a little lower than usual, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about everything, and I think I'm starting to get it. I think I understand why you did it, why you made me see that stuff. It's hard to wrap my head around everything. I turned to look at him, my heart swelling in my chest. I didn't have to say anything. He was talking now, and that was the first step. The anger was fading, but so was the wall he had built between us. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were getting closer again. I know it's hard, Malik, I said softly, my voice steady. I didn't want to throw you into all that, but you needed to see it. Life's not all about being comfortable and safe. Sometimes you gotta face things you're not ready for. But that's how you grow, that's how you learn to fight for yourself. Malik nodded slowly, chewing on his bottom lip, clearly deep in thought. I get that now. I wasn't seeing it before. I was just focused on my own little world, thinking it was enough, but it's not. You can't keep running from everything. I could see the shift in him, the maturity creeping in like it always does when a kid finally starts to realize how big the world really is. He was learning, slowly but surely. I don't know if I'm ready for all of it, Malik continued, looking at me. But I'm ready to start. I'll try to do better. I need you to know that I'm not mad anymore. I get why you did it. But it's still gonna take me a while to really get it, you know. I smiled at him, the weight I hadn't realized I was carrying easing up a little. I know, baby, I know, and you don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just take it one step at a time. That's all we can do. We sat there for a few more minutes, the conversation turning quieter as the weight of the moment settled over us. But it wasn't uncomfortable, it wasn't forced, it was just us figuring things out as we went along. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to worry. Malik wasn't perfect. Neither was I, but we were trying, both of us. We had more work to do, more lessons to learn, but we were in this together now. He wasn't the same kid who had stormed out of that warehouse thinking I had betrayed him, and I wasn't the same mother who had thought that showing him the harshness of the world would break him. We had both changed, and that was okay. The next day, as I was getting ready for work, I found Malik standing in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. He was humming to himself, not even noticing I had walked in. I stood there for a moment, watching him, marveling at how much he had grown in just a few weeks. "You good?" I asked, breaking the silence. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something in them that wasn't just confusion or anger. It was understanding. "Yeah, Mom," he said with a small smile. "I'm good, just figuring it out." And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't failed him. He was on his own path now, making his own choices. But he wasn't lost, and neither was I. The journey wasn't over, it never would be, but as I watched Malik go about his day, I knew one thing for sure: he was starting to find his way. And I was right